Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Darren, and I am surprised that we haven't seen anything for Assassination rogues. So this video is basically to talk a bit about Assass, and how I think it could benefit in upcoming patch of PTR. What are some of the things that could be looked into? And I feel that this spec is a very fun spec. It is a spec that I've enjoyed ever since the beginning of Legion. It is not a specialization I really mained, but it's something I've always enjoyed. Just the raw damage that it brought in, especially at the beginning of Legion. It was not about CC anymore, and I was willing to accept the idea that Assassination is not going to be about crowd control. It was an interesting idea. It was an interesting concept. The rogue spec that's all about damage. I mean, why not? It was a really interesting concept, and it worked out fairly well. Maybe a little bit too well, but Assassination was basically played everywhere. It was the spec for arenas, it was the spec for BGs. You were doing so well at it, but the other two specs of Outlaw and Subtlety weren't that far behind. You could technically do well as Outlaw and Subtlety, as long as you were within, before any of the patches post that nerfed the agility of Subtlety to the ground, nerfed the agility of Outlaw to no longer playable state at one point, and then completely destroyed Assassination bit by bit by 40%, by 30%, by 10%, and eventually put it to rock bottom without any CC. But Assassination has been an interesting spec, and it's gone through a lot of changes. I remember when they gave it blind because it just wasn't doing enough damage, so then it became viable for arenas. And I think they reverted one of the changes, granting them back 5% more agility. And then they just had to cap it back because, oh no, it's actually doing too good. We can't allow a Demon Hunter players to think that some other specialization besides the one that they're playing, a class, Demon Hunters, oh, they gotta be the top dogs in BGs. I mean, there's a reason they always seem to do a lot of damage, even though they don't get particularly nice buffs, at least for PvP, but I digress. I think with Assassination Rogue so far, we haven't seen a single update. We've seen Subtlety updates, we've seen Outlaw updates, and with the recent build, we saw a lot of focus on the other specializations, and I'm completely okay with it. But it's kind of weird that we only saw that Exsanguinate is getting an energy cost, and that's it. For PvE, Assassination is in a pretty good spot. For PvE, Assassination is doing well, and could use a few changes regarding passive talents that are just not that fun, to change them for something better. But for player versus player and raid environment, Assassin is doing great, and that's all I want to say. This video is mostly for the PvP aspects. The energy cost increase to Exsanguinate isn't going to make it any more viable. Actually, I don't think there's really anything to do to make Assassination more viable for PvP, or more preferable, unless they completely redo the spec. And there are a lot of things they could redo. I was taking a look at some of the talents, and I was even taking a look at what they had planned out in the pre-alpha of Legion. Like the actual very first patch came out, what are the set of talents that they had. First, I wanted you guys to take a look at the PvP talents, and I want to talk about a few talents that are kind of boring. And I feel that Assassination could be more fun for PvP. It's already pretty fun now, but it could be even more fun for PvP with a few PvP talent specific changes. You don't have to redo the whole class, you don't have to redo all of our basic class talents, just the honor talents is fine. We have in a row of fourth row, turn the tables, honor among thieves, unfair advantage. While I like the idea of passives because they can offer you things and change how your already existing spells work, but when they're blatant like turn the tables, honor among thieves, and unfair advantage literally makes it so you deal more crit damage if you have more health than the enemy you're killing. That isn't something you can really control as a player. You can just simply deal more damage, but it's not something you can leverage, it's not something you can explore on. That's what's crappy about it. It's a cool talent, but not that good. It's not that great. It's interesting to an extent, but that's really about as far as it would go, I would say. But that whole row is fine. Passive talents are okay, honor among thieves is okay, turntables is okay, although I think honor among thieves and turntables could get a rework, so they could be a lot more preferable for PvP. Passives are not that fun, and Assassination is riddled with passives. You look at the row 5, you look at the row 6, all of these abilities are just passives. Actually, every single one of them for Assassination, besides the first row, which are trinkets, are all passive abilities. Other specs at least have abilities that you can press and use, but Assassination got a bunch of passives. I guess they wanted for one of the specs of rogues to be more simpler for the players to learn, but if you're going to make a simpler spec, shouldn't you make a more effective spec? And currently I would say Assassination is effective, but to an extent. It's definitely not Assassination of, let's say, patch 1, day 1, where it was destroying people and it was, oh, you could literally go in, press a one button macro back to back to back, and then destroy people in PvP. Like, it was that friendly for casual players, for newer players, people exploring the spec, because it was easy and effective. And right now I would say it's simple, but the effectiveness doesn't really, is not, you have to put a lot more effort to do damage is what I'm trying to say. So it just doesn't really justify the I guess the also, I would say the laziness for PvP talents. We have for row 5 Deadly Brew, Mind Numbing Poison, and Shiv. I would even be fine if they completely redid that row and did Deadly Brew, Mind Numbing Poison, and Creeping Venom. Creeping Venom is a talent a lot of people enjoy. Mind Numbing is basically never taken. Deadly Brew is cool, but that'll be at least an interesting turn of passive abilities, because all of them modify, let's say, how your poisons would do, and of course a lot of them would have to do be adjusted a little bit, but have Deadly Brew, whatever poison you have, which I guess would be Deadly Poison, you would always have Mind Numbing or Wound Poison applied together. So then in Arena or RPGs, you could choose to be more of a healer killer, somebody who specializes in killing healers. Add Venom, Creeping Venom to that row, but make Creeping Venom worth the damage, where you'll be fine replacing a Wound Poison effect, the Mortal Strike effect, with a much stronger version of Creeping Venom. I actually would be cool with that, because then you could go for a more DPS heavy spec build, or you could go for a Wound Poison, a healer killer, healing reduction spec build, or Mind Numbing Poison, and make Mind Numbing Poison like really powerful, maybe anti-caster poison, or you could make it a poison for just about anything really. It doesn't have to be specifically anti-caster. That's just some initial ideas that I had that I was able to kind of throw out at you guys just off the top of my head. But that kind of option for poison would be a lot more interesting than just have Deadly Brew, Mind Numbing, and Shiv, because basically you're making it so that, oh, you're giving us one useful talent and two kind of dead talents. I mean, it's no brainer which one you're gonna pick. At last tree, I do like the idea of Creeping Venom and Flying Daggers and System Shock, but if, let's say, Creeping Venom was removed, Flying Daggers I think could be more interesting. I like the idea that it deals more range and it has a damage increase if it hits multiple people. But what if they redesigned it to be a part of a bleed-based spec, an AoE-based spec? One of the things that I love doing as Assassination Rogue is spreading my dots everywhere, but sometimes it's difficult because you don't have enough energy to get the Mutilates out, or maybe Fan and Eyes back to back to back, and get all the common points on everybody and make sure that everyone has ruptures ticking. The more ruptures and bleeds I have on everybody in general, the more energy I get. So if I have a bunch of people dotted up with rupture, I'm not only dealing a ton of damage, but I'm getting a lot of energy back out of it. In the past, in Legion Alpha, they had a talent before Exsanguinate, where on rupture it would have a burst of bleed damage around the inflicted people, and whoever was inflicted by rupture, if they're, let's say, in a group of people, the rupture would burst and has a 20% chance every time that it bursts, which would happen every time that it ticks, to infect people around the area with a full duration rupture, or whatever the duration that you originally set up that first rupture to be. So let's say somebody in a BG, let's say a paladin gets ruptured, he runs back to the behind the lines next to a healer, a rupture ticks, now the healers have bleeds. And maybe they could make it with Flying Daggers, where every time you use Fan of Knives, you have a chance to spread your ruptures to other targets. It might be a little bit strong, so a lot of balancing would need to be done, but at least it would be an interesting talent, because then you're modifying a passive, or you allowing a passive to be in the game, but that passive modifies an already established ability to function in more than one way. So you would have more than one functionality for an already existing ability, which I don't think is bad. I actually think it would be kind of cool. It's a lot like Paralytic Poison, if anybody remembers Paralytic Poison back from Mr. Pandaria, because I don't think it was the Immortals genre. In Mr. Pandaria we had a Paralytic Poison, which would be on the same row as Prey on the Weak and I believe Dirty Tricks. So it was really between Paralytic or Prey on the Weak for a lot of classes, or a lot of specs of Rogue. We had Paralytic Poison, and it was interesting because it wouldn't be quite your Creeping Venom. It would have a stack, and after 4 or 5 stacks, it would stun the enemy without incurring a DR on your other stuns. So really, let's say, a really skilled Assassination Rogue could actually time that stun, so that when you use your stun-based abilities like Cheap Shot into Kidney, if you're able to manage the stacks on your Paralytic Poison and watch for them, you could actually maybe hold off your Kidney to go into a Cheap Shot, into a Paralytic Poison stun, into a kidney shot stun. So you could actually do a lot of cool things, and it involved player feedback, it involved player interactivity to make this work. So without the player actually being present and actually pressing abilities, doing all the things you're supposed to do in order to make the magic happen, more or less, you wouldn't actually be able to accomplish anything. And I thought it was a lot of fun, because yes, it was a passive, but it did things like modified your shift to be a root, which is something that was really cool for rogues. So you could root a mage instead of having to stun them, and then mage will blink the root, and then now you have a stun, so then you don't have to kidney the target. So there's a lot of cool things like that. It's a passive ability, but it modified already active abilities and active skills. It gave you a little bit of that player interactivity. The player actually has to be present and attentive and watch for procs, watch for buffs, watch for stacks. I think that'll actually make the playstyle of Assassination Rogue a lot more fun. Now, I feel like to make Assassination Rogue more interesting for PvP, you don't even need to give them damage increases, like just flat hard DPS increases. You don't need that. Not really. What you can do is simply just make it more interactive for the player themselves. Make it more fun for the player to press the buttons they already have. Make it fun for the player to use abilities, and maybe use abilities in interesting new ways that they have never used them before. And that's the kind of talents that I would want to see for Assassination. I don't know if Blizzard and the devs will be able to really pull this off with Assass, because in Legion, I'm kind of trying to think of Assassination Rogues from Mesopotamia, Warlords, and Legion to see what would be kind of cool for possible changes. But I wouldn't be surprised if this would be extremely difficult to pull this off. But what do you guys think about some of these ideas? Would you think, like, maybe make a role for just poisons for our PvP talents? Maybe some interesting effect, like would you like a rupture that on tick has a chance to spread to other targets? I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool, because then it gives you this bleed spec that you just basically put a really beefy stun on or bleed on one person and let that beefy bleed spread to everyone else. Really be the dot based class. You always want to be the affliction warlock with daggers, and that's what I always dreamed Assassination to be, an affy warlock with them dags, dude. That to me is exciting. But what are you guys' thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm hoping we see some much expected, much needed Assassination updates in the upcoming patch, because I think it's about time. I think we need to see what Blizzard is thinking about Assassination. I know that they said before that this update for patch 7.25 is mostly for Outlaw and Subtlety, but why would we not take the time to see if we can make Assassination great again and make it fun, make it interesting, give it a few nice little doodads to make the just overall experience of playing Assassination a lot more engaging. Because right now, sometimes it feels like when I'm playing Assassination, I pop Vendetta, I pop my artifact weapon, and just having healers just be able to heal through all that, all my quote-unquote damage and quote-unquote pressure, at least that's what I like to call it, the quote-unquote pressure. Yeah, it doesn't feel that satisfying. It doesn't feel rewarding when I'm lining up all my cooldowns and then I get bupkas. But that's really about it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry for a long video, but let me know all that shit in the comments below.